understand. It's
I have the two monitors.
oh,
I
wait a
should be
minute.
the guy looking to make sure that
You
it's.
probably should. Okay, I
Yeah.
think we're live now. Yeah,
I just see
Give
like
it
a
a few
gray.
seconds.
yeah. Give it a few
Yes,
seconds.
we're there.
All right. So round two. Welcome to Haven of Horror. This is episode 12. Shut up, Austin. We have a special guest star, Dan Torrey.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and good to be talking to you guys, too.
Yeah. So just before we get into the movies, obviously we do a little just like downtime talk. What other than the movie one of the movies we're talking about tonight, what are some of your other like just favorite horror movies?
Let's see. So I like the original John Carpenter Halloween a lot. That's one of my favorites.
Hell yeah!
That's definitely up there for me. Let's see. I really like Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola adaptation, because I'm a big fan of that novel. I like the original Universal Horror Frankenstein movie because I read all these like horror novels when I was a kid. I got like a set of them at a bookstore that like were kind of the basis for some of that Universal classic horror stuff. So I watched through some of those, the classic ones when I was a kid. I went to the video store and rented them. So that's kind of like the stuff I like the old monster movies, stuff like that as well. Good stuff.
Oh, nice. Yeah. We used to have to watch Bram Stoker's Dracula in high school, like every Halloween, because it was my drama teacher's favorite horror film.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I used to watch that all the time.
It's definitely, I think, so like the novel is a little less obvious, the fact that he's like a mustache twirling villain at the beginning, but like I like the atmosphere and how faithful that is to like certain aspects of the book. They kind of shoehorn a romance plot into it, but I like that they sort of go and incorporate the historical influence from Vlad the Impaler and kind of like connect that to it at the beginning. Like I thought that was always a cool incorporation for the film.
Oh yeah, and he's got that awesome red armor.
Yeah,
That
it's so
part's great.
goofy looking. He looks like a
I haven't
Anubis,
seen
but
that
he's
in
red.
years.
Well,
And
that's
also,
just his thing, because he goes from that armor to like the big, like goofy, like ball hair.
Yeah.
just real quick, hello Noah and Josh. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Always good to see you.
Welcome.
I didn't really think about bringing any kind of news like we usually do, so we're just gonna skip that for now. So what? Just
Fuck
real quick,
news.
what's? And Austin never
I
brings
know.
anything anyway.
I got no news. Yeah.
So what's everybody been up to? We took a week off because of Easter and everything, and we weren't sure we'd have enough time to watch everything, and then we were able to get Dan on the show, so we said, you know what, fuck it, we'll do The Shining and Doctor Sleep.
Yeah, Austin is spared from watching anime for another week. Right?
That's exactly why, because Dan was like, so when are we doing this? I was like, how about this week?
Oh, are you guys gonna watch an anime horror movie?
It was Vampire Hunter D and its sequel, Vampire Hunter D of Bloodlust.
Oh, that's cool. I've heard Eric from Geekvolution talk about that kind of stuff before. He's a big fan of that stuff.
Yeah, but hopefully we'll do it next week. Right, Austin?
We
gonna
can
show
watch
up,
the
right?
anime next time.
Oh,
As
we're-
long
yeah,
as there's
we're-
no like weird anime schoolgirls.
No, it's not. It's not that. Thankfully.
Yeah, we've made poor Milton wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks already to do that because we keep putting it off. Because the last time we got together, we did Kong and the original King Kong and Godzilla before.
Which I also suggested before we were about to do anime.
It's all part of the plan.
It was a good episode, though. I love those movies. Not as much King Kong versus Godzilla, that I just find to be a weird absurdity. But
Oh, I love that original movie. It's so goofy. But yeah, so as the title says, we're here to talk about The Shining and Doctor Sleep. Probably one of the biggest gaps in years for movies that we've done, because usually the movies we do are pretty close, unless I'm just not thinking of one. So I figured we'd just start in release order and start with The Shining.
Yeah,
And
of
Dan,
course, you can't
since
start
this
with
is
Doctor Sleep. It's a
Yeah.
sequel.
so, and Dan, since this is you're a big fan of The Shining, of course.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about The Shining?
So The Shining is a Stanley Kubrick directed film that came out in the 80s. I think it was 1980, right? Was the release date for this one?
Yeah.
And it's one of the classic horror movies of that time. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. One of my favorite films of all time. I haven't seen Stanley Kubrick's entire filmography, but I'm a big fan of his stuff that I have seen. And in this one, it's sort of like Jack Nicholson plays Jack Torrance. He's a guy who is sort of a typical American male archetype in some ways. There are a lot of people that I've known that are sort of like him. And he goes to the Overlook Hotel in isolation with his family to take care of it for the winter. And the hotel may or may not be have some supernatural forces in it, as we see at the beginning of the film. And then he's slowly, driven to a state of madness and tries to kill his family by the end. And it's sort of the story of how his psyche unravels, along with how that affects the rest of his family. His son has some sort of strange psychic power connection, and yeah.
But Dan, why is it called The Shining?
Because the psychic powers in the film are called Shining by Dick Halloran, the head chef of the Overlook Hotel, which is the hotel that the family stays in the film. And he says that people can shine, and the Overlook Hotel is one of those kind of places. So
I thought you were going to start that synopsis with just "It's the best movie ever made."
Well, I mean, it's definitely one of my favorites, at least. I really, really love this film. So
yeah,
it's a good one.
I've always been in the minority of I've respected this movie more than I liked it. I can't separate the source material. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Stephen King books. And I got to thinking during this watch that it reminded me of Christine in a way of we sacrificed some of the character for the horror. But I think what has made me, because I really liked it this watch, and I think part of that is because Dr. Sleep now exists. It makes me have a greater appreciation for The Shining in a good way. But yeah, I can't deny, this is definitely a classic, and Jack Nicholson is so good in this movie. I think this might be one of his best roles that I've seen.
Yeah, we'll have to get into it when we talk about it, because we've had a little bit of a discussion before about like Jack Torrance as a character, which I think is one of your main contentions with the film adaptation, that he's just kind of a different character in the book versus here. And I think Kubrick is doing something very specific with who the character of Jack Torrance is in this film that is not from what you've told me, because I haven't read the book present there. I think it's different. I personally don't think it sacrifices character for horror, because I think this is in many ways a character study of not just Jack Torrance, but also it's sort of like a critique of the social dynamics between men and women in American society, at least at the time. And I think that's what interests me about it. I kind of like that he's kind of a crazy person going into it, but like the brand of crazy that he is so common that's what's scary to me about it, So anyway, we'll get into that stuff when we talk about it. But
yeah, because I think it's much more. It's not that he's sacrificing character; it's more he's using The Shining to tell the story that he wants to tell.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Kubrick was definitely much more interested in making a movie be on its own rather than necessarily being an adaptation, which is certainly what could piss off quite a few people who really like the book going into the movie. Quite a bit of the criticism could be that it's not a great movie because it's not a great adaptation. I don't agree with that, but I can also understand that to a certain degree too.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's fair. That's actually an interesting angle, Dan. I hadn't really considered that. Because I know that things should stand alone, but obviously, like, I love the book, and it's hard to separate those two things for me.
And that's totally fair. Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
But like I said, with this viewing, especially because we now have Dr. Sleep, I've come to appreciate this movie a great deal. Before, as a teenager, I was like, "What is this? Like, this isn't The Shining."
Yeah. Well, that's why you have the miniseries. That's your good adaptation. This is the good film.
No, there is. Well, and I was kind of disappointed because when they announced Dr. Sleep, I was like, but why wouldn't you remake The Shining first? And now I kind of understand why, because obviously they know any remake of The Shining from general audiences is not going to be like the Kubrick film.
Absolutely.
Which is what most people know.
Except for the 90s series, in Austin's opinion, because apparently that show is actually good. Corey
No, I
Dickens.
That's
said it
not
was
what
a
he
good
said.
Adaptation. I didn't say it was good. Well, yeah, and Doctor Sleep's made because of like the nostalgia for this movie, right? Like Warner Brothers wants to cash in on that.
Absolutely, and
the
I
novel
think
was-
it suffers from that in many ways, which we'll talk about when we
Yeah,
talk
when we
about
get
that movie.
there.
Well, the novel was
Um,
also released in 2013 as well, so it's
Yeah.
6 years apart isn't too long for a movie adaptation of a book.
Well, we'll
And
yeah, like Dan said, we'll get into the Doctor Sleep stuff. Right now, we'll focus on The Shining. One thing I did notice, and I'd heard about this before, but it's been a while since I've seen this, is the set design is so good. That
It
bathroom
is.
set is the way it's shot is beautiful.
yeah.
I love the set design in this, and I don't know, because I'm just like such a fan of this movie. I don't know if you guys are aware, like the way Kubrick shot the movie. So like he studied the way that subliminal messaging was conveyed in advertising when shooting this movie. That was like one of the big things he was interested in when he was writing the script and conceiving the visual look of it. So one of the things he did is he shot the hotel in such a way that, like, if you were to map out all of the shots of the hotel that we see, like hallways would lead to nowhere. There are windows that lead that should not be outside. In the exterior shots of the hotel, there's no hedge maze, but then like there's people running through it. So with the way that the film is shot and the way that the hotel is conceived by Kubrick, it creates this unsettling sort of atmosphere subliminally. That's what he was at least going for, where it's supposed to create this sort of like dream-like prison that the characters are trapped in and they're trying to kind of navigate through. And I always liked that about it a lot. In the Native American motif, of course, is very important to what the film is trying to say thematically, and I always liked that, especially like, you know, the rug design is iconic, and some of the other stuff like the way the hotel looks. That is the Native American burial ground thing in the book, or was that an invention for the movie?
From what I remember, it's been a while. From what I remember, I don't remember anything about that in the book.
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure, but yeah, the whole the hotel being built on a Native American burial ground, and like them having to repel the Indian attacks as they were building the hotel. Plus, like Jack, when he's he's selling his soul to the devil, he talks about the white man's burden, which was the ideology that the white settlers you know sort of used to justify civilizing the rest of the barbarian cultures of the West, the natives, as they were pushing manifest destiny. Like um, Kubrick, this movie is kind of about like the social dynamics of what it means to be a man in American society in many ways, and I like that he incorporated all of that even into the set design of the hotel with the Native American stuff. It's very cool.
Oh,
I don't
interesting.
know. I think it's awesome.
yeah, well, I was gonna mention that too because I knew about the set design where just everything's all topsy turvy. Like there's like you said, that window in
In the office.
in the office, yeah.
Yeah.
But the office is like in the middle of the hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it-
I knew
it's all
this.
very
I knew
cool.
that set design thing, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was.
I knew a little bit about it. I knew it was the idea is isolation from reality, like from the rest of the world, as
Yeah.
if you're trapped in its own dimension, because where it doesn't follow the rules of like any other building that exists. And especially the hedge maze thing is always trippy whenever I watch the film, certainly, because yeah, I can see that it makes no freaking sense, but it is what it is because it follows its own rules and its own reality.
Yeah, well, and this movie just in general has very just trippy feel. Like there's no film that feels like The Shining. It's like I don't find it scary because I don't find a lot of horror films scary in general, but it just has an eerie tone to it where the entire time you watch it you're like, well, like this is just unsettling in a way that nothing else feels like.
Oh yeah, and the score does a lot for that too. Like the music in this film, sometimes it's not
Absolutely.
even music; it's just like unsettling notes.
Mhm.
And it works really well in this movie in a way that, like, I think Doctor Sleep is just trying to cash in on, oh, remember the heartbeat noise from The Shining, and then they like play it over random scenes. Um, like the way that like the sound design in this movie is incredible, and I think that really contributes to the overall atmosphere and the claustrophobic nature of it. It's so good.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
Josh,
Like just the theme is basically just done,
Yeah,
done.
and then you get the Native American shrieking, which is cool too. Like it, I don't know. I love the theme as they're driving up at the opening credits with all the landscape shots, and then you hear that stuff, and then the shrieking that comes in. That's supposed to be like all the dead natives that were killed when the hotel was built. Like it's so cool.
uh,
Oh, it's awesome.
just real
Yeah.
quick, Josh does say that he thinks it stands on his own, but he can totally get why fans of the books were disappointed, like we mentioned. And Noah says from what he read of the book, he did like that Jack was more fleshed out. But at the same time, Nicholson is fantastic in the movie. And absolutely, Nicholson is my best thing about this movie.
Oh yeah, I mean he's great.
He has a way of just like twisting his feet, his like expression, even before he goes crazy to just look like a crazy person.
Mm-hmm.
And then Josh also says it is deeply uncomfortable. The only thing that makes me feel the same is the Silent Hill games,
Yeah,
which I've never played.
I
Yeah,
would
I've
played
never
those
say
either.
I would say Silent Hill has a. I have a little bit of experience in it. There's definitely a similar thing of kind of being trapped in an environment that very much does not follow the rules of reality at all. Um, if any of you know of a PT playable teaser that was released around I think 2013.
I played a
Anyone
little bit
knows?
of it, but
Anybody knows
neither
what
of
I'm
these. Well,
Yeah,
I
it's
know
the
Austin has a
Kojima one.
PlayStation, but
But the idea of it was essentially a scenario where this L would basically hallway and two hallways would just interconnect and keep looping on each other. And the idea was that the environment itself would slightly change every so often and things wouldn't quite make sense within how things were constructed, so much so that you would get this unsettling feel of cabin fever.
Oh,
And then as like small things would happen, you would just get startled by it because naturally it's something that you're not used to and things are unsettling. It's like a masterclass in like minimalistic horror.
oh, that's cool.
And
yeah,
some
thanks,
of the
Konami.
principles are here in The Shining as well. Some people say with the sound that it adds to it. In some ways, although I agree, I think the silence as well, just these lingering shots, sometimes with character, like the bar scene, for instance.
I agree, and there's many like subtle things in this movie that like if you watch a lot of times, like I watch this movie around October every year, and sometimes even before that. But one of the things I noticed over the years that unsettled me the most is there's a scene where Wendy and Danny are watching the TV in one of the rooms, and the TV isn't plugged in. Like little details like that. There's no cords leading anywhere. It's just a TV sort of like existing in the space, like showing them I think it's like the weather or something about how bad and cold outside it is, but like it's like a shot of like zooming out from the TV and you see like the rest of the room, and just that those little details make you feel like you're in an unnatural environment. It's very cool.
Yeah, well, and then you get stuff like Jack's typewriter changes like halfway through the movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's like
Yeah.
two different props for it.
Mm-hmm. That's another little detail that a lot of people miss for sure.
Yeah, guilty on that. I didn't notice those, but that's interesting.
I didn't see it on a first viewing, but I noticed it later. It's you'll see a lot of details just on like a second viewing, and then you'll just, as it would happen with most movies, where you notice certain things, but the details are very important. It's like a lot of stuff in the background that you notice that really unsettles you once you focus in on it. Something that you didn't notice the last time. Especially if you're going into like the last scenes, especially it gets even trippier.
Oh yeah.
Well, and have you guys seen the documentary about The Shining, Room 236?
Yeah, I tried to watch that and I was like, this is ridiculous.
It's starting on my YouTube feed right now. Like
Hilariously bad
Room
documentary. But they
Oh,
do
that
have
documentary.
some like a few things in it, but
Like the movie does it is very like it does have themes and things to say about our society, I think, but I think those people are just way too out there and reading into every, like, they're like, Danny has a NASA shirt on, so that means like Kubrick's trying to say that moon landing was faked by him or something.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is absurd.
Well, the only reason I brought it up was there's just like a part that I really like in that documentary about small details where I can't think, the guy who runs the hotel, he like gets up and he walks by his desk and his name tag is like lined up with his crotch. And they're like, when you get to this moment, it looks like he has a massive heart on.
Oh my god. You talking about the manager, the guy that sits in the office with the American flag on his desk? Yeah.
Yeah, I just couldn't think of what his name was, but yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head either. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked at the
That's
cast.
something.
But
Barry Nelson, I think it was Stuart Ullman.
Yes, that's it. Stuart
that's
Ullman.
it.
Yeah.
the more though that I'm thinking about the novel as well as the movies, I'm wondering if it's just I'm forgetting about the Indian burial ground that you mentioned. Because I do know that one thing that the book does is Jack becomes obsessed with like the history of the Overlook, and his book is supposed to be he's supposed to be like writing a book about the Overlook and its history, and like there's a chapter or two that is just everyone who's owned the Overlook has had a just miserable life.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I think it's supposed to be, and then they like because the ghosts are trapped there, and I wonder if it is an Indian burial ground, like cursing them, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing, if that's from the book, one of the things Kubrick does with this movie, I think is he's trying to comment on like how, because he does this in some of his other films. Like, I don't know, you guys ever seen Full Metal Jacket before?
Yes.
So Full Metal Jacket is also a movie about how like men in American society, like there's a dark side to it. Like, obviously, like, I'm a man that exists in American society. I think there's a lot of positive things about being a man in American society, but there is also a dark side to it. And like, Full Metal Jacket is very much about that, and this movie I think is too. Like, Jack Torrance is kind of like the dark archetype of what an American father is. He's a drunk. He resents his wife. He doesn't really care about his family. He views them as an obstacle in bettering himself. And you know, he has all of those sort of feelings and everything going into the hotel, and like it was a place that was built on the extermination of the Native Americans. And when Jack is incorporated into the hotel, he's lured by like this extravagant party of the Roaring Twenties, and he's in the portrait that he's in at the end of the movie is in 1929, at the very end of that era where everyone was just partying all the time and being rich and not caring about the future and all those sorts of things. So like it's very much a movie about like the social dynamics between and what it means to be a man in our society. I think it like Wendy Torrance, he thinks that this like opportunity to manage the hotel is one going to make him a responsible manager. It's going to allow him to finish his work and be a great writer. But Wendy does all the work, and he like berates her and like doesn't appreciate her at all. He's completely irresponsible. Even the writing that he does is completely unpublishable. So he's kind of like mothered by this woman, but like resents her for that because she's not the attractive woman that he would like her to be. There's very interesting character dynamics between all of the characters in the film that I think that's very intentional. And I like that about it a lot. I don't think it's necessarily the same thing as the book, like what you had mentioned, John, where he's kind of like a good person, and then the horror is like, oh, good dad becomes evil dad by the end. I personally like the idea of like this hotel attracts people that are susceptible to go mad, and the scary thing about it is how little it takes to push people like this to become this crazy, you know?
Yeah,
that's the scary thing. Like, people like Jack Torrance exist. I know them. I've known them, you know, not to the degree that he goes off at the end, but like men who are drunks, resent their wife, are completely irresponsible, don't care about their families. They're very common. I know a lot of them. You know.
Yeah, we now know that Dan has met a lot of axe murderers in his life.
I mean, I'm Irish, you know, like I know a lot of people like this.
Yeah, and Dan, I think that's actually an interesting way of putting it, because I've not really done a lot of research on the themes and everything in this movie, because honestly, up until the last few years, they just really haven't cared about this movie.
No, that's totally fair.
But I think that is an interesting take, and what's interesting, as well, since we're talking about themes and everything about the book, is in the book, Jack Torrance is very much a metaphor for Stephen King. And it's
Of
more
course,
about his
yeah.
addiction and trying to overcome that. And in the
Right.
book, him and Danny have a very good relationship. Wendy, in one of the chapters, talks about how she's kind of jealous that Danny tends to prefer Jack. Whereas in this movie, I kind of get the feeling that Danny is more close to Wendy than he is Jack.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Yes.
Um, and but you still have this stuff like he broke his arm by accident and things like that. But yeah, he's very much a good person, and the hotel possesses him because they're after Danny because of his shining.
Yeah. See, I guess that makes more sense. I guess when we talk about the Doctor Sleep stuff, that was one of the things that I disliked the most about that movie is that they make it about trying to go after the kid that shines rather than trying to incorporate Jack into the hotel. Like it incorporates souls into it and traps them there in some sort of pleasure fantasy for all time.
Yeah.
That idea is more interesting to me than what the Doctor Sleep says it ends up being. But I haven't read the book, so I'm not as interested in that explanation. I guess I really like the idea of this place attracts people who are susceptible to wanting to live in a pleasure fantasy rather than realities of life and having to like be responsible and be a good father. I mean, that's why like the guy that was before Jack, I mean, he was basically the same kind of dude. Like he was the guy that was be able to be pushed to kill his family too. And his, in the bathroom scene, which I think is the best scene in this movie, where Grady is talking to him and he's like, "My girls, they didn't care about the Overlook. They didn't like the Overlook at first." I don't know. I find that more compelling, and I guess, but again, I haven't read the book, so maybe I'd feel differently about it if I read it.
Well, if
Well,
you
and
ever
that's
read
the
the
big
book, let
thing
us know.
about Doctor Sleep is that movie I think is only greenlit because they came to Stephen King and they were like, "Look, we'll take the one adaptation that you hate the most and we'll fix it."
Yeah, that was the other thing I was thinking during this watch too, because obviously I like that movie quite a bit. But I wonder how much of that third act was just to get Stephen King on board.
Well, before we get too much
Absolutely.
into that one,
Yeah.
something I noticed certainly in the themes, and going back to Full Metal Jacket real briefly because you touched upon that, a film I love, by the way, because
It's a great one.
It's great. It definitely is a connection I would see between that one and certainly The Shining. Is that and this it with the social commentary certainly I feel like that there's a component of the older generation's expectations of the younger generation and how
Interesting.
society like feels that men should be or the certain goals that they need to achieve
I
in
agree
order
with
to
that.
be men. And certainly like you'll see that in Private Pile, for instance, and how it can be both destructive and self-destructive as well. Certainly with like how the younger generation goes with the older generation and kind of like reacts to that. In this one is internal because Jack is essentially he's being held responsible for Danny's accident, for him breaking it, for him getting injured. Jack, whether or not he both finds himself responsible, he doesn't want to admit it about himself because he feels, well, this isn't me. It was an accident, right? I feel like there's a subtext of drunkenness, but it's not fully fleshed out in the movie because I don't think that's what Kubrick wanted to examine exactly.
Yeah.
But
I
Yeah, his
agree.
alcoholism really isn't the topic of the movie, which is obviously where then it becomes a different story, really, that you're telling, because
Yeah.
it's not about alcoholism and addiction.
yeah, but Jack Torrance, The Shining, certainly finds himself threatened because he feels like he could never become the man that he feels that he is supposed to be because
I
of
agree
the
with you.
at present.
And that's one of the things that appeals to him about the pleasure fantasy of living in this roaring 20s eternal party, right? Because like he talks to Wendy in this movie about how degrading it would be to shovel out driveways to make a living and do like dirty middle class kind of jobs to be able to get by. He wants to be an upper class socialite. That is his fantasy. He wants to be living in the gold ballroom room with an attractive woman on his arm that is not mousy and very easily intimidated like Wendy. He views his family as the thing that kind of holds him back from being that kind of person, and that is an expectation that is placed on us as men by society. I think like a lot of people desire to want to be upper class. I mean, that's the American dream, to want to have class mobility and be successful and go to the extravagant parties and be married to an attractive woman, all those kinds of things as a man. And Jack doesn't have any of those things. So getting rid of his family, he can live that fantasy eternally in the afterlife for all time. And that's what he gets when he's incorporated in the hotel, when he's in that portrait at the end.
And I think the judgment on his character is fair because he has the mansion now, essentially.
He does.
If he wanted to grow into a full person, all he would have to do is just acknowledge, if I want these things, I need to take responsibility. Because as much as I don't want to shovel out driveways, that job is there present for this hotel. All the cleaning is there for this hotel. And he decides to do none of it. He just wants to brood and stew.
Yes.
And yeah.
I gotta say, Dan, you're like raising this movie in my mind, like, because this,
what do you want? This like, oh, good man becomes bad, ooh, or like deep themes about American culture.
I mean, but
I think it's more
you
fun
could
to view
do
it that way personally.
You joke, but you could do the good man goes bad because you would just keep the themes of alcoholism and struggle with substance abuse, and that's a perfect. I think that would be a good movie. We're never going to get that now, but
Well, we got some of it in.
Well, we're never going to get the Shining version. I wasn't mentioning Dr.
Go
Sleep
watch your
because
mini series.
I would like to see that just out of curiosity, just to see like how bad it is.
I've heard it's,
but
I've heard it's
I
like a soap opera. I've heard, but
your point is well taken, though, John. I mean, like, you know, it's the kind of thing where I can understand where you're coming from in that, like, a lot of people like, for example, Thor Ragnarok as a comedy. A lot of people think it works in that way. I'm a Thor fan. I've read the books. I hate it because it's not like the books that I've read.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
I understand.
It's the thing that every adaptation has to face, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm definitely coming around to this movie. At the very least, just for like Jack Nicholson's performance, like he's this movie and both Dr. Sleep, just to mention that briefly, or my favorite scene is kind of in both the bar scene, for different reasons. And this movie is just like Jack Nicholson is really chilling in that whole scene, talking about like about his kid and how he loves him, but he's also kind of mean to him in the same sentence.
Yeah,
he's
there's
like,
love and resentment in that relationship. It's really interesting.
maybe we should just get into Jack Nicholson. I think that's probably a linchpin because, especially, we know that the criticism around this movie when it was first released, it was a lot of critics hated this movie. And they even said that the major reason why it sucked was apparently, ironically, Jack Nicholson.
Really?
Because they already viewed him, because it's like there's no suspense. You already think he's going to be a villain. And they completely missed the point, I think.
Well, yeah, but I mean, how many movies on here have we talked about where it was critically bashed and now it's a classic? Like,
we have John Carpenter month for a reason, so
that's very true. And I, to your point, it was an interview I think with Spielberg where he was talking about because him and Kubrick were friends. Kubrick showed this movie to Spielberg, and Spielberg was like, I think Jack Nicholson went a little too far in a few places, and Kubrick was like, oh really? Well, I don't care what you have to say. I think he's great.
That's great.
Let's keep working on AI. I don't care what you think.
Modern day Spielberg was kicking in a bit there.
Yeah, right.
I couldn't take it anymore.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. So, Austin and Milton, what are your favorite scenes? Since Dan and I have set ours, any favorites stand out to you?
Mine has been the same since I was a kid, which is that this is the only movie where you get to see Winnie the Pooh giving an old man a blowjob. My dad showed me this movie when I was like 7, and I thought that was the funniest thing as a kid.
Josh agrees with you, by the way, in the comments.
That one guy in China whose people say always looks like Winnie the Pooh. Something like that. I can't remember his name. Sherman something.
President Xi.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, President Xi gives a blowjob to
Xi
what's his
Jinping.
Yeah.
So what about you, Milton? What scenes stand out to you?
Oh my gosh. There's because the photography is so fantastic in this movie, it just sometimes it's really just the scenes of dialogue where the shots just linger in like shot reverse shot, especially within the dialogue. But even then just the actions. I'll just say the bar scene. I'll just make it simple and just say the bar scene. I could
That
pick
was a
many others,
really
but
long explanation to get to the
Yeah.
bar scene.
there are a lot of great scenes in this movie.
Mhm.
It's a fantastic movie.
That was a big build up to just I agree with you guys.
There's
Uh,
the bar scene is great though because it's sort of a microcosm of how well directed this movie is and how much it gets done with visual storytelling. Like one of the things I love about that scene that I've noticed on multiple viewings is like Lloyd, the bartender guy, is wearing a red jacketed suit that lapels look like devil horns, and like if you're looking at the visual storytelling, you can tell that Jack Torrance is selling his soul to the devil when he accepts the alcohol from him.
Yep.
But they don't come out and say, "Hello, Jack, I'm the devil. Would you like to sell your soul to me?" It's very subtle, and I like that about it a lot. Kubrick gives his audience credit. He doesn't beat them over the head with it, and I think that makes it more horrifying. Because it's if you were to encounter a spirit as dark and sinister and intelligent as the devil, he wouldn't come out and tell you who he is. He would tempt you with the things that you're susceptible to, and it would be subtler than, hey, I look like Dave Grohl from Tenacious D. You know what I mean? Like that's not what it would be, and I like that about it a lot.
Yeah. It's like the feeling of it looks fair but feels foul.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's easier to see that from the outside looking in rather than trying to examine yourself with your vice. Because
Exactly.
then it feels comfortable. I could also say the bathroom scene is a great one too.
Yeah,
where
Because
Jack
it
Torrance
is.
being
It's
confronted essentially by the master of sorts, who essentially gives him its command.
Well, and when I first saw this when I was 7, I thought everything in it was hilarious, except for the bathroom scene. That was the one scene where I was like, "Holy shit, this is scary."
I corrected them, sir.
that guy. Yeah, that guy is really creepy. And
Yeah, when Jack looks in the mirror and she. Oh wait, no, you guys are talking about the bathroom scene with the bartender.
Oh,
I'm talking about the bathtub scene.
with-
Never mind.
oh yes,
Oh, that
in
scene.
room
Yeah, that was
237.
also pretty scary. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's actually 3 bathroom scenes in this because there's the one with the axe in the door, there's one with the lady, and then there's the one with the waiter guy.
bartender. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just shout out to the 4K remaster of this film,
Mhm.
which is the version that I watched, with the added like HDR to enhance colors and everything. That whole bathroom set, like the red is really vibrant and really striking against
Oh,
the
yeah.
whites. And it's just, this is a gorgeous looking movie.
It
And I
is.
think it's done on purpose completely.
mhm.
If you
Yeah.
watch a lot of Kubrick's other movies, like he uses very vibrant colors to sort of evoke I don't know if emotion is the right word, but Clockwork Orange does this a lot. Like the way that Alex's house is designed, there's a lot of very bright pastel colors in the paint and the wallpapers and stuff like that. And even in the office scene in this movie, like it's an orangey color in the like. I think that sort of stuff lends to the hotel again not feeling like a real place, because I've never been in a real place where the walls are bright red in the bathroom, you know.
Yeah.
I wonder how much Cooper just takes out of like Jodorowsky's book from like the Holy Mountain, kind of with like that sort of color vibrancy. Anyone
wonder.
knows what I'm talking about.
I don't know what that is, but
I
what
don't
is it?
either.
That's a movie we could watch. I'm not quite sure if it's horror. It's more just surreal.
Oh, interesting.
But I forget. The Holy Mountain was, I think, was a movie in the 70s, I think, where it's definitely a lot more surreal, kind of like David Lynch-esque. But like there's one scene with like color this character is literally going down like a tunnel of colors. It's meant to unsettle you as if he's approaching something. Anyway, that's a whole tangent. Sorry, guys.
It's
Anyway,
like that Willy
just to
Wonka
I
scene for
agree
the
with
entire
Dan.
movie.
Which is the best scene in the movie.
With the bathroom being red, I wonder if that's also supposed to go with the devil thing. Yeah, like now he's in hell because we do the drink thing and then jump straight to the bathroom
Yep.
which is all red. Yeah.
Yeah, because Dan's giving me just like a completely different read on this movie, like I mentioned before, and I can see why this is one of your favorites. The things that you're mentioning, about what Kubrick was tackling is really interesting. And I think I might have picked up on more of that if I hadn't read the book first.
Yeah, it's again, like as someone that hasn't read the book, like that stuff was always very interesting to me. Just because like I love American history so much, so like the things that he was talking about, like I knew what he was referencing. Like it's so strange for someone in like normal conversation to just like bring up white man's burden and like in a place that was like built on an Indian burial ground, and them the party being set in 1929, and Jack Torrance like wanting to live in that pleasure fantasy. Again, I think it's a movie that like you can enjoy it not on that level if you don't know any of those things as just like a regular horror movie, but there's definitely layers to it, and that's what I like about it. It's kind of like an onion. You peel back, and there's just so many things that are going on that you can, on repeat viewings, you notice more and more and more things.
And you're just crying the whole time.
So we've talked to death about Jack Nicholson, and for good reason. But how do you guys feel about some of the other characters and actors and actresses in this movie, like Shelley Duvall, and I don't know the kid's name that played Danny.
Danny Lloyd is Danny Torrance.
Any weak links in the cast?
Torrance, Danny Lloyd is Danny Torrance.
And
any weak links in the
Duvall
cast, or any actors you think could have done better, or is everybody good?
All of that conversation goes back to Shelley Duvall, because I think she got a Razzie, actually.
I think so. She was at least nominated. Yeah. Well, people trashed on Shelley Duvall. I think even to this day, I think people
on
still
set and afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
She's
been ripping her hair out ever since.
It sucks because I don't get it. I don't get why people hate her. I think she works really well in this movie.
I do too. I think she plays the perfect mousy, easily intimidated woman that would be like with a man like Jack Torrance in this movie. Like no other woman would put up with the way that he treats her and the attitudes he has about their family. You have to be with a kind of mousy woman like that. But at the end of the movie, she comes into her own and has sort of a arc where she is able to be strong and save her family and get away, and that's kind of like the triumphant parts of the movie. And like seeing her finally come out under out of his shadow and from under his thumb is great. I like that stuff a lot.
Well, that's probably why we changed the Dick stuff, I would think, where he's not the one who like gets her out at the end.
Yes. And speaking of performances, I really like the guy who plays Dick Halloran. He's one of the standouts for me as well. He's
so good. For me, he's right in terms of ranking performances. I think he's right under Nicholson. Because obviously, like, Nicholson is undisputed, like, the best thing. But the guy that plays Halloran is so good, especially just in the freezer scene where he's just talking to Danny and Wendy, and he's so like charismatic and energetic. It's great.
He's wonderful.
The actor who plays him is Benjamin Sherman Crothers.
Scatman Crothers,
who died in 1986, 6 years after this movie was done. He was professionally known as Scatman Crothers. What an unfortunate name. That's what he was professionally known as.
Yeah, the second you said that other name, I was like, what? Scatman Crothers? What are you talking about? Benjamin. It's not a name.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wait a minute. I thought, because I knew like he went by Scatman, which is
he was an old showman guy.
Cool.
This guy was born in 1910. He's seen stuff.
Well, and I think some of that comes through in his performance, especially at the beginning where he's just trying to like
Yeah.
keep Danny amused and
Mhm.
He's very charismatic.
Mhm.
I don't get his personal taste in a decoration with his room though. Sometimes
I was just about to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Giant
He's like the
nude
nude
woman
black
above
woman.
him.
it's
Yeah.
like at the point of his life, like he doesn't care at all. It's like he puts you in his home. It's like you're going to deal with these photos that I have. You're gonna like me anyway, because I get to do what I want now.
One of the most chilling, so to the credit of that guy's performance, I think one of the most chilling moments of the movie is where they have the score playing with the heartbeat, and there's that like shrieking noise in the background, and it just is zooming in on his face where he's like in his bed like looking up, and it like flashes between that and like Danny having like his seizure thing where he's like foaming at the mouth. Like just him looking at the ceiling is one of the most chilling things in this entire movie because he's sort of sensing what's happening. You know, that's one of my favorite moments in the film too. It's crazy.
So I watched this with my mom because she likes this movie a lot.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
And we got to that scene, and she's like, "I like this movie, but the sound that they're making is really getting on my nerves." And all the tension was just gone because I couldn't stop laughing.
just scat man with those noises. Apparently was a professional guitar player for a while.
Oh, wow.
It's also I think they do a good job of making Danny seem kind of disturbing too, especially at the beginning where you don't know that he has this friend yet. Which I feel like kind of gets dropped a little. Like he comes back for the red room scene, but it doesn't. It kind of doesn't lend itself to the overall story as much, unless I just wasn't catching that like the elevator blood visions were supposed to be like Tony communicating with him.
I think so, or he's channeling something. Like he needs, like I guess, some sort of medium, I suppose, to channel what's going on. He needs some way to like disassociate himself from what he finds to be a very disturbing thing, I suppose.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I always, I mean, it's sort of hard to tell because that scene that what you're talking about, the elevator blood scene, specifically, I always interpret it as like the people that the blood of the people that have died in the hotel, the people that died in order to build the hotel, that sort of thing. Like it's sort of a place that was born in violence, continues to facilitate it, and has some sort of supernatural connection to it, and he senses that. But again, like it's ambiguous, but I like that about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
The ambiguity of this movie, it for me lends to the horror of it, and I think that's one of the reasons why by the end of Doctor Sleep I don't like it as much as I would like to, because it removes some of that ambiguity.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like you're having to do the work for them. Like it definitely helps it. I think.
Yeah, I
makes
agree.
it feel a bit scarier. Yeah.
Yeah, see, I always figured it was just because we shifted most of the focus to Jack in this film, obviously, whereas in the book it's I guess you could almost make a case for a dual protagonist because a lot of it is told from Danny's point of view, but then you get like Jack points of view and Wendy points of view.
I'd say Danny is deuteragonist. I would say that's where I would put him. Like not quite protagonist, but not so much that he's like one of the extras.
Right? No, he's not an extra, obviously, but
I'm also glad we cut the Tony thing from the book because that's silly.
What's the Tony thing from the book?
The Tony thing from the book. That makes no sense.
Tony in the book is an older Danny Torrance that speaks to him as a child. And so Tony always appears to him as a person far away. And as the book goes on, he slowly gets closer and closer. And then when he's like fully like up to him, he's like, "Oh, it's me as an adult."
I don't remember that part.
Sometimes King just gets goofy, as I've noticed. Sometimes in some of his writing, he has famously stated he just writes things as he goes along, and he just writes really quickly.
Yeah, I
he's
like
a genius, but he's also unorganized.
Stuff in there.
Yeah, see, I really need to reread the book. It's been a while.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about Danny and the theming around him and Tony. I'd say it goes right into like the expectations that like the older generation has for the younger generation, because like Danny's like completely out of it. He doesn't even care how he's portraying himself to other people. He's inwardly focused, and he's very introspective.
He's traumatized.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, just in the interest, because we talked about this one for an hour and we still got Dr. Sleep to go. Anyone have any final thoughts before we move on to our rating for this film?
I think so.
This movie led to one of the best Simpsons Treehouse of Horror segments.
I was
so
waiting
I have
for
to
it.
mention that. Yep.
I was waiting for it.
That's all I got.
Have you seen that that segment, Dan?
I haven't. No.
You definitely have to. The Shannon, it's the best.
I'll have to watch it. Yeah,
it's great.
Send it to me after this.
There are certain things from this movie that I only think of like the Simpsons jokes for it. Like every time, like the blood elevator, I can't see without hearing Mr. Burns go, "That's weird. Normally the blood gets off on the second floor."
I guess comments here. Josh has declared what his favorite scene is: the scene with the bear, just like Austin.
Yeah, we
it's like,
mentioned that earlier.
Austin said that right when I typed that. Haha. The bear part is hilarious, says Noah, and Justice, whoever mastered that deserves a trophy.
See, I can't wait for the Overlook Hotel show that J.J. Abrams is making to do an entire episode about where the bear comes from. And like,
I forgot they're making a show about the Overlook Hotel.
Yeah.
That's so
I wonder if that's still
embarrassing.
happening because they seem to be moving all in on DC stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Well,
mean, I would assume it's like Bad
producing,
Robot.
so-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever,
he's
Bad
just
Robot.
producing.
But
can do a
you know
ton of
what? I will
stuff.
say, if it's anything like Castle Rock, I'm excited because Castle Rock was pretty good.
I liked Castle Rock. I didn't watch the first season, but I watched the second one because it had the Misery Girl in it, and that season was pretty good.
Well, it's funny. The worst thing about season 1 is one of the girls in the show, played by Jane Levy, is Jack's niece.
Jack Torrance's niece?
Yes.
Oh,
and she calls herself Jackie Torrance to piss off her parents because they want to distance themselves from Jack and the business at the Overlook.
Funny.
And it's like, oh God, why did you make that choice? Like, but everything else in that first season,
some nostalgia baity stuff in that second season too. But I enjoyed it for what it was. I thought it was pretty good. I agree.
I haven't seen it. I might get into it.
Yeah, I liked the first season quite a bit, and I just haven't had the motivation to watch 2 because it looks like that show's over. Like whatever they may have been building towards is done, sadly. But yeah, I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5. I'm gonna be honest, before we started talking about it was probably gonna be a 3.5 out of 5. But I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. It's a wonderful film. The Kubrick's attention to detail is, second to none. Great performances from everyone. Mileage may vary on some of the side characters because, like we talked about, Shelley Duvall seems to be hit or miss, just depending on what you're expecting, I think. But yeah, I would give it a 4 out of 5, and I'd watch it again. What about you, Dan? Out of 5, what would you give this?
I give this movie a 5 out of 5 because it's one of my favorites. Yeah, I think this is of all the horror movies I've seen. I mean, I think this is the best one I've ever seen, and I rewatch it every year at least once. It was a pleasure going back to. You guys gave me a great excuse to watch this again, so it was great going back to it. And yeah, it's a near perfect film for me.
Noah gives it a 4.5 out of 5, and of course he'd recommend and watch it again. We couldn't decide because obviously we want to have some kind of rating or like recommendation thing, so we just went with like out of 5, and we'll watch it again or whatever. Austin, what about you?
I'm jumping back and forth between a 5 and a 4.5. Fuck it, I'll give it a 5 too.
And I'll be the contrarian and put down 4.9 repeatant as my rating out of 5.
Get out of here. Dan, if you want to replace this guy, you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
But actually, in all seriousness, 5 out of 5, actually. This is a film I go back to a lot, quite like The Thing. 2 films I really, really enjoy. I think The Thing is like maybe slightly better for me.
Yeah, I would put the
It's
thing
like
above
agree
it.
with that.
it's
Yeah.
like choosing two great things. How do you compare apples to oranges?
It's like
True.
trying to decide which of your two children you won't let drown. It's like I don't know.
I'll take a 2 for 1.
Okay. All right. So obviously, moving on to the second film of the night, we'll try to condense this a little bit because I know it's getting late for people. Obviously, we're discussing the sequel, Doctor Sleep. I feel like this movie is made for those who are pissed off that The Shining wasn't The Shining. Wasn't the book, and it's like here's The Shining. Like here's for you Stephen King novel readers who have always been disappointed you never got a proper, well done adaptation, because I know you're gonna bring up that fucking miniseries again.
Let's go watch that, you fuck.
So Austin, tell us about Doctor Sleep.
Okay, so Doctor Sleep is about psychic vampires.
Psychic vampires, ladies and gentlemen.
Psychic
Hell,
vape
humans.
or vape ghosts.
It's about a doctor that puts people to sleep, but then that's only like 5 minutes of the movie. And it's about a little girl and Danny Torrance. And that's what Doctor Sleep is about.
I love your
The
summary
interesting thing
process.
about Doctor Sleep as just a concept, Stephen King talked about he had originally, no intentions of doing a sequel, but at one of those like expos that he goes to or whatever, like, where he meets fans, somebody asked him whatever happened to Danny Torrance. He was like, maybe I'll write a book about that, and he threw up, I think, a poll on one of his social media sites.
He wrote this book based on a Twitter poll in which he was like, "What would you guys rather see? A Shining sequel or a new Dark Tower book?"
Really? I didn't know that.
So we got
And I
got
think he
Doctor Sleep.
eventually wrote both of them because he writes like a book every minute. But that was the one he did right then.
He's the most
Interesting.
published author because he's the person who spits out the most books out of more than anyone else in
His
existence.
publication history is insane. Like,
Yeah.
But with the book, I've always heard mixed things. Like I've always heard people say it's not very good.
it's got
But,
hit and miss things. I would say that with the movie and the book, the movie is a perfect adaptation of that book until you get to the third act, because obviously the Shining book and the Shining movie ended completely different ways. Spoilers for Doctor Sleep and the Shining novel here, just for fair warning. I meant to say that as well during the Shining. But Dan, in case you didn't know, Doctor Sleep's ending where the hotel blows up, that is the ending of the original novel.
Okay.
And so
I did know, I think I heard in an interview Stephen King say one of the reasons why he hated the Kubrick movie was because he thought that Stanley Kubrick was trying to hurt people with his movie. And he was like, the perfect encapsulation of that is in my version of The Shining, the hotel burns down, and in Kubrick's book, it freezes over. It's very cold and distant, like in my book is about heart and warmness and all that kind of stuff.
and if there's
whatever,
any
Stephen King.
person you should listen to about movies, it's Stephen King.
Maximum Overdrive, right? The greatest film of all time.
But so the third act of the book, it still goes back to the Overlook, but now it's like a campground because the hotel is no longer there,
Oh, interesting.
and stuff like
Yeah, 'cause
that.
isn't that where the psychic vampires live, or something like that? They live on the
Something like that.
on the
I think it's
campground where the hotel used to be.
something like that, because I know that's where the final showdown is. And they changed other things, like they wipe out a lot of them because one of them gets sick with the measles or something like that.
Yeah, that's in the book.
And
I don't
because
think so much in the movie.
I'm talking about the book. Because they're so old, they never really got sick before, but they're getting weaker because there's not enough steam, which is in the movie to some extent, and that wipes out a good lot of them. And then it's really down to like Rosie. Is it Rosie the Hat?
Rosie
Whatever
the
her
Hat,
name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Rosie
and
the-
Dan. The other major difference, and this is where I will give the movie points. Abra in the book turns out to be Dan's half sister. At some
What?
point, Jack had an affair.
Stephen King, the
Or-
answers are not at the bottom of that Coke pile. Stop.
I can't remember the exact relation, but somehow, yeah, Dan and Abra are related, like by blood.
Oh my
So they
god.
kind of there's a line in this. Well, she calls him like Uncle Dan and all that stuff in this, and then she's like, "We're kind of related," so maybe that's what they were referencing.
That might be.
That could be
Because
because we should say this is Matt Flanagan, who also did Gerald's Game, which is
Which
one
Matt
of
is a
the
great
few,
movie
Flanagan?
too.
and
Mike-
it's one of the
Mike
few
Flanagan.
movies of a book where the movie is way better than the book.
Oh, interesting. I've only seen the movie again, and I love Gerald's Game. That was a great movie.
Yeah, it's great. The biggest thing it has is that it's telling that story in like an hour and a half and not 600 pages, where the book will just ramble off on stuff.
Oh
Like
no.
there is just an entire chapter where he just like rambles about like men and how they hate women. And it's like,
Oh.
why is this in this book?
just a slight correction for people listening, it's Mike Flanagan, not Matt Flanagan.
Oh, I always forget if it's Mike or Matt. Yeah, Mike Flanagan. Yeah, there's like a repeated thing in the book where Stephen King constantly says that men think of women as it's something like it's like cunts with legs or something like that, where it's like that's all women are, and it's so weird.
Interesting. So the,
Also,
like,
you
you
really
know,
feel Steven.
that must have been Stephen King after he watched Eyes Wide Shut for the first time.
Yeah, exactly. And Mike Flanagan cuts all the fat, and he's like, "Okay, we don't need any of this nonsense."
Yeah, because the book is like 300 pages, and for a premise that simple, that should be just like a short story.
I think it's longer than that. I think it's
No,
over 4.
I just looked at it.
Oh, maybe it's just Mike printing then.
Yeah, maybe.
The Canadian version of the novel is different.
I get the King cut. It's a full
King
150
cut.
pages longer.
Well, and I think that's the thing with Stephen King in general. Like, I consider King to be my favorite author, but in some books, he's wordier than the premise calls for.
I've heard that about the It novels, which I've also never read.
Oh,
but
God.
those are like
There
poems.
are entire like sections of that book. It took me 3 times to get through that book because there's entire sections which is just history of dairy, and Eric mentions this in the one of the videos they did on Geekvolution. It boils down to dairy bad. Like,
Terry is bad.
Well, the last King book I read was Cujo, and the majority of that book is just like a climax of a story, and it's just cut
Oh.
up between like the main character's husband like doing like an advertising deal and like worrying about that, and every time you cut back to that I was like, oh god, just go back to the stuff I came to read. Don't
anyway,
care.
as even if this is
Yeah, we should
slightly,
get into
on
Dr.
topic,
Sleep.
but obviously this is a years later sequel to The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, but it is also a sequel to the novel because it's adapting the novel as well. And that is a hell of a balancing act, like trying to both be like an adaptation of that book, which is a sequel to the original King novel, but also adapt a sequel to the Kubrick movie, which are two very different things.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you
Um,
got to make Warner Brothers happy, who just want the like nostalgia of The Shining, and you got to make Stephen King happy, who hates The Shining. You somehow got to walk that line.
Yeah.
So I
It's-
guess we'll tackle the third act first, just because that's I think where a lot of the contention with us in this movie comes in. Like you said, Dan, you are a little lost in that third act because it is just The Shining again.
Yeah, I think the thing I appreciate the most about this movie is that for the first 2 acts, it's very different than the tone of The Shining, even the type of film that it is. Like,
Mhm.
I would have expected a sequel to The Shining, not knowing anything about the book, to be another haunted house movie, another someone being driven insane by a haunted house, that sort of thing. And that's completely not what it is. It's about like vampires that feed on people's psychic souls or something. Like that what exactly they feed on is a little vague, but that is a completely different premise, and it's a completely like left turn from what I would have expected the sequel to be. So that stuff I thought was really interesting, and that combined with seeing how Danny Torrance inherited some of the demons that his father had, I liked all that stuff a lot, and it was not relying on the nostalgia from the previous movie, and then in the third act it just becomes, remember the axe from the hotel, remember the guy who says cool party, remember the stair scene with the bat, like remember the typewriter, and all of that sort of stuff. And they also the thing that I don't like about it the most, because the nostalgia stuff is fine, like whatever, they got to do that, like you said, to please Warner Brothers, I guess, and the people that go to the movies to see that kind of thing. But the thing that I didn't like about it the most is that this is supposed to be a sequel to the Kubrick version of The Shining, and the goal of the hotel is sort of ambiguous, but it appears to be wanting to incorporate people into its collective consciousness as spirits, so that they can live in that 1929 grand ballroom pleasure fantasy. And the explanation that they give here is that the hotel is trying to, like the psychic vampires, feed on people's shine powers. And I just think that's way less interesting. And it kind of contradicts what Kubrick was thematically trying to do with the first movie. So for me, as a fan of that movie, I don't like that. But the rest of it is great. So I'm of two minds about it. Like, I like a lot of things about this movie. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a good movie. But by the third act, it kind of falls apart for me, just because of the thematic contradiction it makes as well, with the lore and the world that Kubrick created in his movie, and the nostalgia bait stuff, because that stuff was just, I cringed every time. Like when Danny Torrance gets hit in the leg and then he's limping around just like Jack Nicholson with the axe. I'm like, come on, this is so dumb.
And I can definitely see where you're coming from it. And I think, you have, obviously, your opinion is from seeing the movie, and you may be onto something. But I think that's one of those things where it's starting to buckle under how many like balls they have to juggle with pleasing Warner Brothers, pleasing Stephen King, adapting two very different source materials.
Yeah, because that's when we have to have that imagery, but we want it to be what it is in the book, where it's feeding off of The Shining. And yeah, exactly, just kind of buckles under all that. For me, though, the nostalgia stuff that kind of like makes me roll my eyes the most is the just random stuff. Like, you get Rose the Hat walks in the hotel, she turns to her right, and it's just the blood elevator, and then she turns around and just like keeps walking. Like, there's no correlation to like them even being in the same spot.
Yeah, but I was thinking this when I was watching it last night. And I don't really remember the theatrical cut because I've only seen it once, and I think this is the better version of that movie.
Absolutely.
The 3-hour cut, yeah.
But I can't help but be at least somewhat fanboyish, because I'm getting to see the stuff that I didn't get to see with Kubrick Shining. But I'm with you. I would have cut some of the nostalgia. I love that shot of him looking in the door from where Jack like started knocking it down with the axe. Because Ian McGregor almost looks like he could play Jack Nicholson in this movie. Or not Jack Nicholson, Jack Torrance. God damn it.
Yeah, he's a great Danny Torrance in this movie. I think he's perfectly cast.
I think so too.
How I look into this third act, it also kind of... I'm a bit more down on this movie than I think some other people might be, and some of the third act definitely shows that to a bit, because I do like some of the stuff that does happen in the third act. I do, once again, like the bar scene, but I also like that it's an inversion in some ways of how Jack Torrance was acting in The Shining. Past that point, it's like I then seem to get a more intimidating villain than I think Rose the Hat is throughout this movie. I have issues with how she's presented as a villain, because I just don't find her intimidating at all. And I feel, unfortunately, that the movie reinforces that problem, because then we get to the point where the mansion has these more intimidating characters here and more of a force of nature thing. I know others might disagree, but throughout this movie, I was not intimidated by Rose at all as a villain.
See, I'm going to kind of agree with you, because I don't think she's intimidating, but I don't think that's what's scary about her. It's the fact that she has no empathy. And what I really like is they establish that she's like, the scene where they're like torturing that child to get his steam is almost is like really uncomfortable. It's not that she's menacing, it's that she she's crazy. Like she doesn't care.
I also
Well, I
think
don't
she just has a
necessarily need
great
that, but the
performance.
movie also seems to have an issue of let's make sure that our villain is very relatable because she does have empathy for her family, very much so to the point where quite literally she feels pain every time a family member is killed, especially during the climax of the movie. Certainly,
The thing that agree with John in some ways. I think the thing that interested me about her and the rest of her family, I guess, I agree with you that she does have empathy for her family, and that's like an essential part of her character. But I also think it's interesting that because of the nature of what they are. I mean, it's a typical kind of vampire thing, right? But like they view the Shining people as like cattle, like they're just food to them,
like
so they don't have
lower
empathy for them. They treat them like animals, and that's what I think is scary about them. But it's a very classic vampire horror trope in that way, and I think it works well enough here. I like the actress's performance a lot. I liked how kind of like wily and witty she was, and the fact that she like didn't have some patience for some of the other family members, like she, when she's like meditating and the guy like knocks on her door and she's like, "Go away!" Like I thought she was like funny in some ways too.
If we would have taken her more seriously, if the kid wasn't already trouncing her in their first confrontation.
But that's
True.
not a downfall of her. They established throughout the entire movie that Abra is extremely powerful.
Yeah, but the fact that the villain seems to have no chance against her is, I don't know.
But
I would have liked to have had that scene perhaps a lot later in the movie, not in like the middle.
But see, I'm going to disagree with you because remember the scene where they fight is a carefully laid trap by Abra. When they meet again on even playing grounds in Danny's mind, she's winning it first, but then Rose at the end is the victor until Danny comes in and saves her.
And their trap goes wrong too. They almost lose.
Yeah, like.
Yeah. But I don't buy that she's going to succeed. She's already in a place where she can't win anyway.
Well, and the only reason they do win is she wins is because Danny helps her when he possesses her body and like steers the car into the tree and stuff. Like if they weren't working together, she definitely would have been eaten by them.
Well, the main reason they came there in the first place is because they knew it was dangerous because of the spirits that were already there. They did the work for them.
Well, and I mean that's the other thing is they wouldn't have won if Danny hadn't set those ghosts free and effectively, sacrificed himself.
Yeah, and the battle's already won once that happens.
Well, but I mean that's the thing is it's the consequences of Danny sacrificing himself to stop this monster, and then he becomes the monster, and it's back to paralleling him with his dad, which is one of the main driving focuses of this movie is paralleling, Danny with Jack, which is done beautifully in that bar scene.
Oh, I know, and I like that. Just Rose the Hat has almost no power when we go more into that theme.
One thing I will say about her, and it's something I thought of since the first time I saw it, which is that opening scene with the little girl is like the perfect Pennywise scene, and it's like 10 times better than the both It movies combined, where you can actually buy that she like brings like these kids in and then like takes them, as opposed to Pennywise who shows up and he's weird and like his eye goes off and stuff.
Yeah, that's fair.
I did like that scene. So.
But yeah, I like, and I'm with Dan. A lot of the stuff that I like in this movie is centered around Dan and around Dan Torrance, and just paralleling him with Jack, and it culminates, I think, in that bar scene, which is my favorite scene in the movie. I know people are mixed on whatever that guy's name is that's playing Jack in this movie.
That would be the kid from E.T.
Yeah, but I think he works wonderfully, at least in that scene, where he's Lloyd and Danny's kind of having the same similar conversation to what Jack had with the original guy.
Well, see, I think this movie in general makes such a good statement for why we need to stop doing the young CGI thing and just recast people.
Yeah.
They do a really
Especially
good job
with Shelley Duvall and Scatman Crothers. Both of those actors are so good. And the Shelley Duvall woman, I don't know what her name is, but she gets like even the tone of voice like
The
so
scream,
perfectly.
dude, when she
I
goes,
know.
Yeah.
Danny! She sounds
Danny!
just like her.
It's
Well,
really good.
and
It's like they
Dan and I
Close
were
your eyes
talking.
and you can't tell. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, Dan and I were talking about this a little bit, but the first time I saw this movie, I thought that was the guy from the original Shining movie playing Dick Halloran.
Yeah. Th- to your point, John, about like the character arc for Dan in this movie, that's like the thing that I like the most about it, and why I don't completely dislike it, because I think it's interesting that Dan Torrance at the beginning of the movie seems to be on the same track as his dad. He's sort of like an irresponsible drunk who doesn't care about people. He's stealing money from a hooker that also stole money from him. But there's still that like spark of goodness in him when he like puts the kid on the bed, and like Dick Halloran is the one that sort of like pulls him out of that, because he's the one person that is like a legitimate father figure to him from the grave, and like tries to help him get on the right path, which apparently Jack didn't have. And he finds a purpose that, like being the Dr. Sleep, that Jack wasn't able to find, and being the hotel manager and the writer. And that's kind of the difference between them. Like Dan was able to find a purpose in this world, that he's able to help people, and all of those sorts of the all of the sorts of positive things that having a purpose in life gives you, that helps him pull out of the alcoholism and all of that kind of thing. I liked all of that character stuff a lot, and I think that is the best part of the movie, for me anyway, because I think all of that paralleling and the character work they get done with him is great. Um, and even the self-sacrifice thing at the end, I think, works. I just wish it was in, because it's a good culmination of all of the stuff they've been building throughout the movie. The basic point is, like, Jack Torrance was a very selfish man. The reason why he killed his family is because he was totally motivated by selfishness. He wanted to, have his family out of the way so he could be the writer, the writer that he thought he wanted to be, live in this pleasure fantasy, whatever. Danny Torrance chooses the complete opposite path. He sacrifices himself for something that's bigger than himself, and helps this little girl realize her own path and all those sorts of things. I think that's good. I just wish it was done in a different context than the nostalgia bait and like contradicting the mythology of the previous movie that I liked.
Yeah, and that's completely fair. And part of the thing I like most about them going back to the Overlook is I think it's also a bit of facing your fears.
Yeah,
Because I think they established that like he's still in a way traumatized
yeah.
by
I
the
mean, who
Overlook
wouldn't?
Hotel.
After
Yeah.
seeing all that stuff.
He hits that bottle because his father did, certainly. Ewan
And I
McGregor's
like
great in
the
this movie. I would, yeah.
well, I like how we're dealing with the trauma stuff too at the beginning, where he's still haunted by all those ghosts from the
Mhm.
Overlook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I'm a little fuzzy on how you can make ghosts go away by like locking them in your mind. Like that as a premise, I'm like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not very well
I
explained in the book
I
either.
actually thought it, but
I
yeah,
write it off as because of his shine and like
Yeah, it's
because
just
he's
his
supposed to
force
be
powers.
he's very powerful in the shine like Abba is later because like Dick Halloran, I can't remember if Dick says it in the Shining, the Kubrick film, but in the book Halloran tells Danny like you have the strongest shine I think I've ever seen.
I
No,
don't
that's not in
remember.
that movie.
Yeah, it's
No.
not in the movie. Yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of what's in the movie. He says it's a very strong shine. It says when they're on the park bench, Dick talks about that quite a bit.
We're talking but we're talking about in the Kubrick movie.
Yeah, kind of. He
Um,
kind of says
one of my in the book, one of my favorite like just character interactions in the Shining novel, is Dick Halloran has Danny just think at him really loud to test him, and he nearly like gives him like a massive migraine because he's that like powerful.
oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so
That's
yeah, I mean
cool.
that's just kind of been the only explanation that we really get for the box thing is it's another thing of the Shine, and you'll see the Shining in like other Stephen King stuff too.
Yeah, because The Shining feels a lot more like a superpower in this movie, I find.
Yeah,
as
I
opposed-
agree.
Yeah,
Ewan McGregor plays a Jedi again.
yeah, exactly. It's just like, yeah, and like different people have different shining powers. Where like what somebody can like be more persuasive. Like there's the Jedi mind trick girl
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Speaking
Danny
of
can take
her,
people over.
Austin, did you recognize her?
Yeah, it's the girl from The Babysitter, right?
Yeah. She's just, I guess, typecast as like bad characters now. Oh, that's all
If
I've
you
seen her
really,
in.
if you really
I
think
like her as
about
a villain.
the like Shining stuff in this, it kind of does break down in some ways. It's like, okay, so like, you know, I get Danny Torrance is powerful, but like, why didn't Dick Halloran lock any of these ghosts away in boxes before to stop all these people from murdering people?
Yeah.
You know, it coincidentally, these psychic vampires that can sense shining people from all over the world didn't sense any of the people that could shine from the previous movie because we needed the last movie to happen without them in it, you know. But
Yeah, it is one of the downsides of saying years later there's these people that feed on
That's what you get. King show up and be like, vampires, they feed on
But-
telekinetic power.
I have to say though, Austin, with the like different kinds of shine, that one didn't bother me as much in the book, and I think that's another case where the movie is struggling to balance like the 15,000 different things that it has to be a sequel to. Because if you read the book, right, Austin? Oh, you haven't. Because in the book, Danny has like visions of the future, and that's one of the like hanging threads throughout that book is he hears someone that sounds like his dad like yelling at him that needs to take his medicine, and it's like building to the climax, of course, but he can't articulate that to his parents, so it feels more like just, well, we've seen somebody who can see the future, and now there's like these other people that can do these other things, which
'Cause
is
that's the Tony thing where he thinks it's his dad, but it's like him in the future.
which is one of the reasons why I know we wouldn't have done it, but I think we should have remade The Shining before we did Doctor Sleep, because as much as I love this movie, it does kind of start to collapse under the weight of everything it's trying to be.
I've heard a lot of people say that Doctor Sleep should have been like a miniseries and give some time for development with like the past before getting into like the book to a certain degree. I think doing that might have been better than a director's cut, like 3 hour long movie. I think it needed a little bit more development, maybe a bit. I don't know.
Maybe, but
I don't really have an issue with that stuff. For me, it's just like it would have been nice if you cut at least one or two nostalgia things at the end. Like before that, I think I would like this movie quite a lot.
Yeah.
I kind of wish the movie ended with like after the little girl like crashes in the car, like they had a fight in the woods and then the movie ended.
Yeah,
Like
maybe
that would have
maybe the Rose had is just like observing for a bit and then she comes in.
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Yeah, because the movie's an hour longer than it should be. Just after the woods scene, we're already prepared for the climax, I think.
Yeah, and like as a fan of that, like the Shining movie, there's just like stupid things about like them even going to the hotel in the winter. Like in the Shining movie, they say like it snows so much there that the reason why the Torrances go there in the first place is because no one can drive through the snow up there in the winter. And like Danny Torrance is like, I'm gonna go in my Toyota Camry up the mountains in the winter, and it's like
there's the
it makes
cops
no
coming
sense.
at the end.
yeah, it's like this is supposedly not possible. In the first movie, they have to have specific like snow vehicles to be able to go down the mountain because it snows so much. But in this movie, they forget about that because
Yeah,
You gotta
it's
make
always-
Stephen King.
It's global warming, Dan.
Well, you got to make Stephen King happy, or this movie isn't happening.
True.
Another weird thing was some contrivances. I do like the woods battle. I do wonder why they didn't put the girl in a hotel or something like that, so that she wouldn't be in the one place where they knew that, where Rosa had been. I suppose. I feel like to a certain extent the dad's death could have been really avoidable if they just planned ahead with that.
I think they just didn't think that their plan would fail. They were too.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of them underestimating who they're dealing with, and Rose the Hat outsmarting
See, I
them.
think the question is much more: if the one dude knew to go to the house instead, why did the other ones still
That is
fall for the trap.
that is another question there. Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
it's like
I didn't think about it until this viewing. I was like, wait a minute.
it's a
They were
weird
all
thing.
like together. What did he tell them when he went on his own?
It seems like two contrivances on top of each other. One, we have to put Abra in this situation where she can be kidnapped, and we also have to like artificially create the sense of twist or something. I mean, aside from that, I really liked it. I liked the gunplay, although I do wonder sometimes why having vampires that could be killed by bullets.
Well, but they're not vampires in like their traditional sense.
That's true. I understand that. And at least they're immortal and they could like heal themselves if given.
Yeah, they mostly just suck. They just don't suck blood.
But even then, like they establish at the beginning that they're not immortal; they just age much slower.
Oh, what I mean, yeah.
That old guy that lived to see the rise and fall of the Roman Empire must have like been really safe this entire time.
He must have. I don't.
Well, and that's
survive
the
all the
boogeyman
Visigoths
guy
coming
from
in.
Gerald's
Yeah.
Game.
well, and that's how that, like I mentioned, they kill a lot of them in the book is with disease because none of them have like immune systems.
That would have been cool to see stuff like that.
I wonder where they were during the Black Death then, if they needed to feed. Like in Europe, certainly.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Like,
I
the
mean,
mythology of this seems to suggest that more people shined in the past than now.
That's true. Yeah.
yeah.
But it's sort of vague. I wasn't really sure. Is that expanded upon in the book? Like why there are more shining people in the past than there are in the present?
I think they give like a 1 or 2 sentence line about it, but it's been a while since I've read it.
Okay.
But that is very much a thing in the book is the steam that they're getting is getting weaker and like more of them are going hungry. Like they're pushed to a point of desperation, which is why they're after Abba or Abra, because she is
Gotta kill the dancing queen.
because she is so
You are
powerful in the
vape
Shining.
queen.
It's because
She's
putting chemicals in our water that are turning our freaking steam gay.
because obviously Abra is
Bugs.
very. You could almost parallel her to Dan from The Shining, because now she's the young kid with a much more powerful connection to The Shining, and
Yeah, and she lost her dad, but her dad is a drinker here too, because he has to like drink to deal with the
And
the
he's
fact
a
that all this is going
writer.
on. Yeah, but he's like a good person, and I think it's interesting, like the generations theme that Milton was touching on. Like she, the efforts of the prior generations have made this girl like a better person than Dan and Jack were, obviously, and carrying the torch of dealing with the ghosts of The Shining. Like it shows at the end of the movie, she's kind of like passed on to that burden when she sees the creepy old lady in the bathtub. So like my question was like, if someone has all of the Shining ghosts locked in their mind when they die, do they all get released? Is that the idea?
They just explode into vape.
Or did
I
they
would
like,
assume
never go
it's
back
one of
into
two
Danny's head after he
things.
releases them at the end of the movie or something?
It could be perhaps that their souls are trapped, maybe within these vampires. Perhaps. I wish we would have gone more into for a movie that likes to explain everything. They don't seem to explain some of the things in mythology a bit more.
Well, I think some of that is just there aren't a lot of answers because King is more interested. A lot, and this is a common thing with King's books is he's more interested in the character stuff.
Yeah, which is totally fine with me. Like I think all the character stuff is great.
I would assume it's one of two things because since these are very much the book ghosts that feed on the steam.
Yeah.
They would either eventually wither away because there's no food left, or they would be released.
Interesting.
Or cycle out, as they call them.
Yeah, like the old guy that happens to in this.
Yeah. But yeah, any final thoughts on Dr. Sleep? Because I think we're getting close to 2 hours.
I don't think so. I mean, I would definitely recommend. Surprisingly, people take a look at it. Like when this was announced, I was like, "Oh, like that sounds really cynical," but it's surprisingly like a pretty enjoyable watch. It's not a movie I'm going to go back to as much as The Shining, I don't think. But watching it, The second time I had a worse viewing than the first time, where I enjoyed it pretty well, but I still enjoy all the things that are good about the movie. I think there's a lot of good writing, especially like we said, like I was talking about with Danny Torrance's character and what John mentioned as well. Um, yeah, I mean, it's one of the least cynical, like, sequel things that of a classic movie franchise. I mean, it's only one movie, so I don't know if you can call it a franchise. I guess it is now. That I've seen. I mean, it does have some of that at the end, but like for the first 2 hours of the movie, I think it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Although
Mike Flanagan
I
should
bet
do.
Warner Brothers is really pissed off with King that he didn't call the book Shining 2 or something.
Yeah, or
Because
like some sort
nobody
of
saw this
reference.
movie.
Yeah, or like some sort of reference to the first one. I'm kind of surprised they didn't retitle it, to be honest, because the Doctor Sleep plot in here is so minimized. Like he doesn't really do all that very much in this at all.
Yeah.
There's a couple of scenes with it, but
It's a damn shame that this underperforms so badly. Like,
yeah,
Well, it seems to just be this franchise because I don't think The Shining did super well, but I could
Yeah,
be
I'm not
wrong
sure,
with
actually.
that.
The
Obviously, we know like it critically was bashed.
Well, the
Uh,
budget for the original Shining was $19 million. The return was $47 million for the original.
Okay, well, never mind. Fuck my point then.
For Doctor Sleep, not counting in marketing because there's a huge budget that goes into that. Budget was between $45 and $55 million. The budget range is vague for Doctor Sleep, and the box office is approximately $72 million.
Mm-hmm.
But they say that it underperformed. And
When they tried their best to be like, no, this is a Shining sequel. Look, Red Rum.
yeah, and I remember the poster was like Danny Torrance on the tricycle thing in the hotel.
Oh, I
It's,
don't think I've seen that.
Yeah,
That sounds
I
awesome.
actually really do like that poster because it's like the bottom half is him on the tricycle, like going up a hallway, and it's all red, and like the upper half is adult.
Oh wait, is it Kid Danny Torrance on the
Yes.
tricycle?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Second you said it, I imagined you and
Oh,
McGregor on the
dude, that would
tricycle.
have been amazing.
That's why I was like, that sounds terrible.
Is it
Oh,
you,
that's what I
and
wish it was
McGregor's
now.
on a tricycle?
But yeah, I know what poster because the digital copy of the book I have has that cover where it's like the upper half is adult Danny Torrance and like the bottom half is.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
okay,
reminded
yeah,
me a
that makes
lot
more
of the episode 1 poster where you got like Anakin and his shadow is Darth Vader.
Yes. No, it is pretty similar to that. I didn't think of that comparison, but you're definitely right.
I found the image and posted in the Gen Chat, by the way, for a
Nice.
reference.
Yeah.
I like Ewan McGregor in this film. I feel sad that he keeps getting tied to weird projects that don't really seem to pan out that much. Rip Birds of Prey.
That movie's just embarrassing.
I
I
mean,
feel
hey,
embarrassed for everyone
This
involved.
movie's still pretty good. This isn't Birds of Prey.
But
Yeah.
he just hasn't gotten a lot of hits, like past. What he's most well known for is a very troubling prequel trilogy. Aside from that, he has a few odd things
Hey,
here and
the
there.
prequels are
He's famous
wonderful.
for
You
train
leave them
spotting
alone.
too, but not much beyond that. It's a shame because he's a great actor. He clearly is.
Yeah.
But
I mean
Yeah,
that
he's very good in this.
that like
Yeah,
speech
I
he
like
has to
how
Jack
far
Torrance
they're
is
willing
great.
to go with like him hitting rock bottom. Like when he turns in bed and like that prostitute or whatever, she's like dead in his bed and she's got the like dead baby. That's crazy.
Yeah.
that was a great scene.
Yeah, and there's like the fly like flying around in the inside of her eye.
Yeah, whenever the movie was getting to that stuff of like character, focus with Danny, that was like I think where the movie was at its best.
Agreed.
Well, and I mean that's Stephen King's like highlight is he has these wonderful horror concepts like with the movies that we watch today, a guy trapped in a hotel going crazy or a bullied girl with powers. But what carries those concepts is the characters and like their interactions and the development.
How do you
Yeah,
all
the
feel about-
magical white powder that gives him the ideas.
how do you
No,
all
that was
feel-
just for Cujo.
Yeah, how do you all feel about the child actress for Abra?
I thought she
I'm
was good.
Yeah,
I
she's-
think she's
Splitting
good.
her, I'm not sure. I didn't think she was bad. I felt there was something missing, but I guess I'm criticizing child actors too much. I suppose.
See, I would
I mean,
say
like if you weren't feeling her performance, that's totally fair. I didn't really think about her being bad or anything. But she wasn't like standout amazing to me either. You know, I
Yeah,
thought she was good.
she's kind of
Yeah,
just
I
like a
think both
plot
of these
device.
movies have solid child performances. Obviously, that's something that kind of plagues a lot of stuff with child actors. I think
Well, and I
both
feel
these
like
movies
we're kind of getting better with that.
pretty
Like,
good.
there's some good
Yeah.
child actors out there nowadays.
Well, yeah, but like, there's
Although
still a lot of
speaking,
bad ones.
yeah, speaking of children actors, I don't know if you know this, Dan, but the original Danny Torrance has a cameo in this movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
who does he play?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
He's in the baseball scene. I think he's one of the guys where they're like, "Check out this kid. Look at the arm on him."
Oh,
He's the main
interesting.
supporter for that kid who gets murdered and buried in a shallow grave.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
because
I'm
he,
I almost forgot about that.
now.
Yeah.
That's cool.
yeah, because I think The Shining is like the only movie he ever did.
And the kid from E.T. plays the ghost of Jack Torrance in the hotel. It's
Well,
weird. that the
he's in
cameos
like
are
every Mike Flanagan thing. 'Cause he's in
Yeah,
Gerald's Game too, and Hunting of Hill House.
Yeah,
didn't
he's
know
just
that.
kind of a
Oh.
regular Flanagan actor.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. He brings a lot of regulars into most of his stuff, but I think he's the only one he brings in this movie, with the exception of the older vampire guy who is the boogeyman from Gerald's Game.
Yes. Oh, he's other stuff. He's in a lot of other stuff too. I forget. What
Well,
his
yeah,
name
but we just mean like the other Flanagan projects he's
The
worked
other
on.
Flanagan stuff. Get out of here with your filmography listing.
Carol
Uh,
Strucken. Carol Strucken is great, and not just in Mike Flanagan stuff.
Can we just give Mike Flanagan like more Stephen King projects, because he clearly understands this material? Like,
Oh,
Yeah.
Twin Peaks. He's in Twin Peaks.
Well, Mike Flanagan seems to just like doing haunting stuff because it's all he like ever does, with the exception of Hush, which is like a slasher film. But he mostly just does different haunting things.
I haven't watched Haunting of Hill House. Is that any good?
I like what I've
Good.
seen of it. It's one of those things where I'm not a big fan of like haunting stories, but I like his work. He's one of my favorite modern directors. But it's also just it's a like what 6 or 7 hour miniseries,
Yeah.
Yes.
and so
And then
it's
there's
just
a
like trying
sequel
to stay.
one too. It's like Blythe House or something, right?
Yeah, but I think he
Lighthouse.
was less involved with that. I only watched part of the first episode. I need to go back to
Yeah,
that one.
because
And he's making a third show too.
because Jay from Red Letter Media tweeted about it, and they cast one of the guys from The Room, Greg something.
Greg
Sestero.
Sestero.
Greg
Yeah, he's
Sestero's
in that show. Yes.
I actually forgot about that.
Watch it now. That's
I'm going through the
incredible.
Disaster Artist right now, actually. He seems very sincere.
Thank you, Austin. The only thing I could think of was Greg Nicotero, who's a completely different person.
Did you know Greg Sestero was almost one of the hobbits in the Lord of the Rings?
Weird.
What?
Yeah, he was almost cast in it.
That's amazing.
But he was too well built. He was too tall.
Damn.
Wow.
All right. My final thoughts are just this is both an adaptation, of course, of the book, but it's also the Shining adaptation that I, in a way, I've been waiting for.
Well,
This
except for the miniseries, which is the
God.
adaptation you want.
I'm gonna watch that one of these days, Austin. I'm gonna make you watch it too. We're gonna review it.
That's fine. And then I'm
I've
gonna
never
be
seen
like,
that. If
"Are
you
you
guys want to
happy
have
you
me
got
back,
what you
maybe-
wanted?"
Hey, you're welcome back anytime. I just got to find a way to watch it.
Stephen King
Yeah.
even wrote that miniseries. I think.
Yeah.
I find ways to watch everything if you guys.
But
just,
this
give
movie
some-
also made me appreciate The Shining as a film more, because I can kind of look at that as its own thing, since we have a good adaptation of that material. Not to say that, of course, like I said, The Shining is a good movie. It's just, in my opinion, a bad adaptation. But yeah, I'm going to give this 4.5 stars, and I will definitely watch this again. What about you, Dan? What you thinking?
I'd probably give it like a 3.5. I think it's a good, solid movie. That has a third act that I don't like as much, but I think thematically and character-wise, everything tracks. And for most of the movie, it's like so radically different from what I would have expected a Shining sequel to be, that I really like that. It's very bold in that regard. I like that they were unafraid to just go and make a movie that wasn't exactly the same thing as The Shining again. It was definitely not the Force Awakens of The Shining, which I really appreciate. Because a lot of these sort of soft reboots, it's here's the old cast passing the torch to the new generation, and it's basically the same movie setting up to like go and do new stuff after. I liked that it was different. So yeah, I definitely recommend people watch it. It's good.
All right, Austin.
So to capitalize on that Force Awakens thing, the first time I saw this, when we got to Danny, I was like, well, when Abra goes to Danny, I was like, oh, so this is the Last Jedi done well, right? Like she shows up and he's like, fuck out, get the fuck out of here. I'm old and I don't care. But we actually made a good movie. I'm gonna give this, like Noah says, I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5, I think. I like this movie a lot up until the climax, and even then, I probably like it maybe a little bit more than you guys do. For me, it's just like you need to cut like a few of them. Like the climax itself, I'm like whatever, it's fine. I just need less references in it. But
Yeah.
I'm more annoyed by the pointless ones, like I said, like the blood elevator and stuff like that. But also the first time I saw it when we got to the hotel, I expected it was just gonna be like Home Alone, but instead of traps, it would be the ghosts.
Oh my god.
Like
I
the
want to see that movie.
vampire lady like walks into one room and you get like the twins and then they attack her and she's like, whoa, and then walks into the next room and oh, it's the bathtub lady, whoa.
And then it's the cool party guy.
Yeah, and the Winnie the Pooh's trying to blow her and it's like, whoa.
No, the president of China is trying to blow.
But yeah, so at least it wasn't that, I guess.
Well, I mean, they kind of did do that at the very end.
But at
with
least it's all
of them.
like all of them at once. It's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah, true.
Also, again, kudos to the casting because when they like zoom in on the two little girls, it's almost identical to the original movie.
Some of the ghosts are well cast, but some of them are terribly cast. Like the good party guy sounds nothing like the old one, and looks nothing like him.
You could tell which ones they cared about.
Yes, exactly.
You got to get the "Hello, Danny" girls right because everybody.
Yeah, not
remembers
that I was like going to this movie needing. Oh, they better get the good party guy right, but it's very noticeable, you know.
Well, that's Dan's favorite ghost.
like,
You know,
I like the guy that plays Jack, but he's not doing a Jack Nicholson.
He's not, and I kind of appreciate that, you know.
No, definitely, yeah, because at least it's not like just like an impersonator or something like that.
Oh,
Like
man,
it could have
that would've
gone
been
way too far.
terrible.
well, and he's one of my favorite things about the scene with him and Danny, because like Danny's giving this really like heartfelt speech, and he's just like, I'm afraid you have me mistaken. You know, my name is Lloyd. And I feel so bad for Danny in that scene
Yeah.
because he wants to clear things with his father, but
Oh, and the part where he talks about like when Wendy dies, so good.
Yeah.
That whole speech is just like Ian McGregor acting his like ass off, and the guy playing Jack just being like, "Sorry, you have me mistaken with someone else."
Oh yeah, it's great.
But yeah, Milton, what is your final score?
1.5.
No, it's not.
Sorry,
It's not-
1.9.
I can recognize it's not a bad movie, and I recognize the things that it's doing, and I appreciate some of it. I'm not. The third act is its own thing. I liked and try to not criticize the movie too much for that. So, kind of putting some of that aside, it may be a taste thing. I don't think the villains are doing it for me. I buy them as characters within the story. I guess I just needed something different coming from an antagonist, I suppose, for my own viewing pleasure. I'm not sure. Ewan McGregor's great. The cast is great. They're doing their jobs. I don't know. I can't. Maybe I'll need to watch it again. Maybe I'll need to watch it again with people. Maybe see what's up. But
totally fair.
I'm gonna say 2.75 out of 5. It's better than average, but I can't.
Dan,
I
you want to replace this
recognize
guy?
you're
Because I
working
mean, we
hard
can
at
make
this.
that happen.
I'm just gonna be honest with you.
No, it's okay because when we do Halloween, it's gonna be like Civil War with me and Austin.
You're fucking
Oh, you guys
right.
doing the original Halloween?
Around
Yeah.
Halloween time, yeah.
Around
And I
Halloween, yeah.
famously don't like. I like that movie, but I don't love it.
But,
And
That's
it's like
totally
Austin's
fair.
favorite.
That's one of my favorite horror movies too. I love the original
It's
Halloween.
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
2.
all right.
And I guess I'm just disappointed that Greg Sestero's not in it as Frodo or something. I don't know.
No, he should have been the great party guy.
No, Greg Sestero should have been Abro. What the fuck are you guys talking about?
Talk about whitewashing.
Greg Sestero plays an 11-year-old black child.
No, Tommy Wiseau comes in as
Well,
Abra.
Tommy would be Rose the Hat.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Why do you
I'm
have
going
those
to eat you
boxes,
now.
huh?
Come
Okay,
here, you little bitch.
All right, guys, it is
lying.
nearing 1 o'clock, so we're gonna wrap up this stream. Milton and I will be back Sunday. We both watched season 1 of Buffy. We're gonna do maybe like an hour-long talk about it. Austin, you're more than welcome to be there. I know you've seen that as well.
Well, I got a Simpsons review to do on Sunday. So
Fuck the Simpsons.
Right. John.
No, that's cool. Just if you're available, feel free to hop in. We're gonna be doing. I talked Milton into doing season by season reviews.
trying to think
Dan,
of the
you're
title.
more than welcome to come back anytime you want. Just if there's a movie you think might be fun to talk about, let us know.
Absolutely,
Cool.
and let me know like what you guys have on the docket too, because I'm willing to be exposed to new horror movies too, because I like the genre.
Yeah.
I haven't watched as many of them as you guys have.
Yeah,
but
just-
yeah,
We'll,
it's my
more
favorite.
reasons to skip anime.
No.
Or watch
So
it, I should say.
when we end the stream, I'll run some of the movies that we're doing in the next couple weeks by and see if any of them catch your eye.
Awesome, sounds good.
But we appreciate you guys being here. We'll try to get some gaming streams done as well over on Twitch, and I upload them here on YouTube as well. But we appreciate you guys, and we appreciate Dan for being here. A great addition to the insanity that is this show.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was a great time.
And this will be up on Anchor and Spotify tomorrow, I believe. But until then, we'll see you guys next week. Have a great night.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching.